in Kenya to investors in Shenzhen so as to allow a capital formation platform on a larger scale. An African mobile networks operator, Helios Towers, has priced its initial public offering at about 115 pence per share, giving it a market capitalization of almost $1.5 billion. Helios shares began conditional trading on London Stock Exchange on Tuesday, and that's after selling a total of £250 million of shares. And Japan's Takeda Pharmaceutical says it will sell a portfolio of over-the-counter and prescription medicines in the Middle East and Africa to Swiss pharmaceuticals firm Asino for more than $200 million. The sale, which is expected to close in the quarter ending March, comes as Japan's biggest drug maker looks to trim its debt following the $59 billion purchase of Shire. And backers of Facebook's Libra cryptocurrency project are forging ahead after selecting a 5-member board on Monday. They shrugged off the latest member defection by online travel company Booking Holding earlier in the day. Libra has lost its last global payments backers on Friday when MasterCard, Visa, eBay, amongst others, abandoned the Geneva-based Libra Association. And that's a look at our corporate headlines. Well, let's head into a quick break now. Here's a look at what's still to come. Nigeria's borders to stay closed indefinitely as the country checks goods coming in. And the revolutionary boat service by Uber and what it means for Nigeria's busiest city, Lagos.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global business, only on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible? And why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sutra Naidoo. Hello, Nairobi.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there. To see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you. All around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back. Well, let's go back to one of our top stories of the day. Kais Saied is officially the new president of Tunisia after winning 72% of the votes during, of course, the runoff election. His rival, Nabil Karoui, came second with about 27% of the vote. Well, joining us to discuss the outcome of that election is Professor Gerhard Uda. He's a professor of political sciences at Helwan University in Cairo. Well, great to have you on the show, sir. sir. Now, of course, Syed secured at least 73% of the vote, as we mentioned. He's actually an independent law professor, and he also has hardly any political experience. So he pledges to fight corruption. He pledges to decentralize the country. What is your take on this new leader and certainly his plan for Tunisia going forward?
Let me tell you about. I think Tunisian politics has passed through a very good experience that has elected someone from backbencher of the elite, and because it's from backbencher of the elite, not one of the primary candidates. So he was not a primary candidate. But he was a backbencher, and it seems that he has a solid reputation, and is not corrupt. And I think that the whole thing that Tunisian politics fought against corruption. So intended to elect who is not corrupt. And I think the Qais Said, that's why they elected Qais Said. Regardless of his opinions, regardless of his ideology, regardless of anything, they elected him primarily because he's not corrupt.
Right. Well, he may be the least corrupt options for Tunisians, but the country is facing several challenges: high unemployment, an economic slowdown, social unrest, attacks by armed groups. What do you think will be his biggest challenge as he gets into office?
Yeah, it depends on his ability to maneuver the centers of powers in Tunisian politics. I think the guy seems determined enough to carry his way through and to see his way through. But we have to wait and see to see whether he will be able to navigate through Tunisian politics. Tunisian politics is very troubled politics, and we will see how he would be successful or not.
You're quite right, because successive governments have failed since 2011. Well, we have to leave it there, Professor. Thank you so much for joining us in the studio. That was Professor Jehad Uda. He's a professor of political sciences at Helwan University in Cairo. Well, let's move on now. Nigeria's customs chief, Hamed Ali, says a ban on goods coming into the country across its land borders will last as long as it takes for neighbors to stem the flow of smuggled merchandise. Ali also said that all imports should now come through the country's ports. The entry points will be monitored more easily and generate much needed revenue for the country. President Muhammadu Buhari unexpectedly closed Nigeria's borders to goods traded in August. He said the closure will end rampant smuggling across the porous frontiers. Now, the decision has had a devastating impact on Benin, which is Nigeria's neighbor to the west and a key exporter of agriculture to Africa's most populous country. It has also pushed up prices for staples such as rice at markets around Nigeria.
It is important to note that 95% of illicit drugs and weapons that are being used for acts of terrorism and kidnapping in Nigeria today come in through our porous borders. However, since this partial closure, the acts have become drastically reduced. Our conclusion is that the arms and ammunition these terrorists and criminal elements were using no longer gains access into the country.
Well, let's stay in Nigeria. Global ride-hailing firm Uber Technologies has launched a pilot test of a boat service in Nigeria's commercial city of Lagos to attract commuters who are seeking to avoid the megacity's notoriously congested roads.
Kehinde Ajayi, a Lagos-based architect, is putting on his life vest at a boat terminal in Nigeria's commercial capital. His destination is Ikorodu, a town located on the outskirts of Lagos. It takes about 3 hours to get to Ikorodu by road, but the boat crossing only takes about 30 minutes thanks to Uber. The global ride-hailing firm has launched a pilot test of a boat service in Lagos last week to attract commuters like Ajayi who are seeking to avoid the megacity's notoriously congested roads.
This is a great improvement. You know when to leave work, you know when to leave your home, you know when to get to this to the ferry jetty to get your boat, and really Uber has really set the pace for even every other competitors out there.
The waterway service, Uber Boat, is operated in partnership with local boat operator Texas Connection Ferries and the Lagos State Waterways Authority, otherwise known as LASWA. Passengers will be charged a flat fare of $1.39 per trip. Uber officials said there would be 4 trips a day, carrying up to 35 people on a boat during the 2-week pilot.
We at Uber, we wanted to see what can we do now? What can we do now to try and increase awareness of options that are available today for people to beat that traffic, right? You know, the trip from Ikorodu to Falamo by boat is 30 minutes. That can take 2 hours, 2.5 hours plus by road, right? So Uber Boat is about us being aware and tuned in to what the specific challenges of transport are in Lagos and doing our part to see how we can work with Lagos State to try and address some of those.
The United Nations predicts that Nigeria's population will more than double to 400 million by 2050, which would make it the 3rd most populous country in the world after China and India. With a combination of population growth, congestion, and poor infrastructure, commuting remains a challenge for many in the country.
Most people will be like, Omi, I'm not going to enter the water because, number one, your jackets are not even correct. If there is a mishap, most times all the mishaps have always ended up very fatally. And that's because most of them, if you actually investigate, the jackets were not even correct in the first place. So most people get drowned. So most people are scared of the waterways.
I think there are some people who may be a little bit hesitant. They haven't been on a boat before. Is this safe? But, you know, what we've learned is that there are multiple safe operators on the waterways. We have the Lagos State Waterways Authority, which is also doing its part to ensure that operators on the waterways are safe.
Uber's boat initiative follows a number of motorcycle ride-hailing firms that have targeted West Africa as an area for expansion in the last few months. Technology giant Google also launched a new feature in July that allows Nigerians to hear travel advice in a local voice on Google Maps. All these initiatives are an effort in easing traffic congestion in one of Africa's busiest cities. Terry Wangari, CGTN.
Well, let's find out more about how this new service will work in Nigeria. We're joined by Abdul Bak Ladi Balogo. He is the Managing Director of Lagos Ferry Services Company. Great to have you on the show with us today, sir. Now, boat services and certainly the use of waterways in general, that's not a new idea in Lagos. For many Lagosians, and I'm one of them, it's not the first choice of a transport. So give us a sense of how you think Uber's new service will fare in Lagos City. Well, hello, sir. Let me try once again. Welcome to the show, Mr. Ladi Balogun. Can you hear me? As I asked, how do you think Uber's new service will fare in the city? Well, it looks like we've lost him there. So in the meantime, let's take a quick break. Hopefully we'll get him back later. Here's a look at what's still to come. The United States imposes new sanctions on Turkey over its incursion into northern Syria. And the EU's Brexit Secretary, Stephen Barclay, says that reaching a deal with the European Union on Brexit is still very possible.
CGTN Europe. business in Africa is at a crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant. Only on CGTN.
Data out of the country. The country's foreign currency reserves.
With a dedicated and diverse team of anchors, CGTN now brings Africa to the palm of your hand.
I'm Perina Karibe in the heart of Nairobi, which is bustling.
From everyday heroes to the continent's most powerful figures, we bring their voices to you.
We haven't changed.
And this is something most of us are very excited about.
We bring you news that's changing perspectives.
I'm Uche Okoronkwo reporting from Nairobi's city center.
News that brings Africa to the world. CGTN. See the difference. How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are these stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
At 1:30, let's recap today's top headlines. In Mozambique, polls have closed for presidential, parliamentary and provincial elections. The elections are widely expected to extend Frelimo's decades-long rule. And the Congolese army is preparing to launch a major offensive against the Islamist militant group Allied Democratic Forces, which has been accused of carrying out widespread atrocities in eastern DRC. The army has been reinforced in northern Kivu province to wipe out the rebel group. And in Libya, health authorities say an airstrike hit a house in the capital Tripoli, killing at least 4 people and wounding 4 others. Now, the victims were all sisters. Their mother is in critical condition, while a 4th sister had to have emergency surgery to amputate a leg. The airstrike hit a house near a military intelligence camp in the Libyan capital. And in South Africa, former President Jacob Zuma has lost his court bid to have fraud and corruption charges against him dropped. Zuma is now expected back in court on Tuesday to answer to charges of fraud, corruption, racketeering and money laundering related to the controversial 1990 multi-billion rand arms deal. And that's a recap of today's top headlines. Well, let's move on now to the latest on China-US trade talks. Beijing says it is in agreement with the United States in regards to reaching a trade deal between the two countries.
What the U.S. said is the actual situation, which is consistent with what we know. There's no difference between the two sides in reaching economic and trade agreement. This agreement will be of great significance to China, the United States, and the world, as well as to trade and peace.
Now, elsewhere, the United States has imposed new sanctions against Turkish officials and institutions over the country's incursion into northern Syria. President Donald Trump says the U.S. will also suspend negotiations for a $100 billion trade deal, as well as raise tariffs on Turkish steel imports to 50%. Now, last Wednesday, Ankara launched a cross-border assault on Kurdish fighters. The move came after Trump withdrew some American troops troops from the region, drawing sharp criticism from fellow Republicans and American allies. Now, Turkey says the offensive aims to remove Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces from its border area to create a safe zone for millions of Syrian refugees.
Well, the United States of America did not give a green light to Turkey to invade Syria. The President has been very clear on that point and reiterated that to President Erdogan today. President Erdogan, I think, knows President Trump's mind on this matter very clearly today. But President Trump pressed him very strongly in the telephone call today to immediately embrace a ceasefire.
Now, earlier we spoke with our correspondent Mikhail Bardavid in Şanlıurfa, that's near the Turkish-Syrian border, to find out how the situation is and also on that redeployment of Syrian government troops in northeastern Syria. Take a look.
Now, this area is somewhere that Turkey had already been negotiating with the United States for over a year now for the YPG militant group to be withdrawn from that area. U.S. troops are allies of the YPG group in the fight against ISIL, and Turkey had requested that the United States facilitate that the YPG withdraws from Manbij for over a year now, but that did not happen. So yesterday, Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan stated that Turkey would now be implementing their plan regarding Manbij, and today Turkey's defense minister has stated that clashes between Turkish forces and the YPG militants inside Manbij took place. Turkish Defense Ministry has stated that 1 Turkish soldier was killed, 8 Turkish soldiers were injured, and they also stated that 15 YPG militants had been neutralized in Manbij, which means that they have either been captured, killed, or have surrendered to Turkish authorities. Now, that area, Manbij, is now going to be very, very sensitive and risky at the same time because the YPG is now striking a deal with the Syrian government. Now there are reports by the state media that the Syrian army is now moving towards Manbij. Now the U.S. forces are in the region, a Syrian military as the army is moving there is in the region, the YPG militant group is in the region, Turkey is in the region. So we're talking about a very complicated picture with the major powers in that region. It's going to be critical to see what will happen in the upcoming days, specifically in Manbij.
Meanwhile, Iranian President Hassan Rouhani says Tehran is ready to restart nuclear talks if the United States removes all sanctions against his country. Now, tensions have been escalating between the Islamic Republic and the United States since May last year. The fallout came after U.S. President Donald Trump pulled out of the Iran nuclear accord and began reimposing sanctions on the country. The remaining partners in the deal with Tehran include Britain, China, France, Germany, and Russia. The European parties, on the other hand, have repeatedly said they're committed to saving the accord. However, their efforts have so far borne little fruit. And moving on, a new round of cost-cutting measures went into effect on Monday at the United Nations headquarters in New York as the international body struggles to keep operating amidst a severe cash flow crisis. Our UN correspondent Liling Tang looks at what this means for the international agency.
At the United Nations daily press briefing,
yes, I've asked for a list of what you're saving. Yes,
awkward exchanges about service cuts to escalators belied the severity of the organization's money woes.
I checked with the comptroller this morning. He did mention there were some partial payments coming in, but we're still trying to run through some of the numbers. So hopefully we'll have an update tomorrow.
That controller warned Friday that the UN needs at least $200 million to fill an immediate shortfall, as payments to the UN's budget are still outstanding. The funding gap has forced the UN to freeze hirings, cut non-essential travel, and put in place a wide range of other cost-cutting measures.
Now we are at a point where I still need the $135 million to pay the salaries. I cannot even afford to pay the $40 million. So I have to save every penny that I have to save. And what choices do I have? Do I say now, don't pay the air charter bills that we have to have for Afghanistan? That's the kind of call we are making on a daily basis.
The UN says dozens of countries still owe annual dues amounting to $1.3 billion, forcing the world body into its deepest deficit in about a decade.
Only 131 countries out of 193 UN member nations have paid their dues. Among those who haven't paid are 7 nations that account for 97% of the money still owed: Argentina, Brazil, Israel, Iran, Mexico, Venezuela, and the United States, which is the only permanent member of the UN Security Council that has not paid up.
The US owes $674 million for the year and has historically been the largest donor to the world body. But the Trump administration has been very critical about the US paying the lion's share. In a reply to a report on the deficit, US President Donald Trump tweeted that all member countries should pay up, not just the US.
We are looking at this in terms of all member states who are obliged to pay their contributions in full and on time. And we have been in touch with member states who owe significant amounts of money to the organization to see and to encourage them that we can have that cash forthcoming.
Latest measures include scaling back interpretation and documentation services, meetings and conferences, purchases of goods and services, heating and air conditioning, and utility bills. But it's unclear if these measures are enough to avert a default next month if nations don't pay up.
A severe financial crisis.
Li Lingtan, CGTN at the United Nations.
Well, let's move on now to Brexit matters. EU Brexit Secretary Stephen Barclay says that reaching a deal with the European Union on Brexit is still very possible. But EU ministers expressed more skepticism as they gathered in Luxembourg for the last preparatory meeting before a summit of national leaders in Brussels on Thursday and Friday. Now, the main sticking point is customs and security arrangements for the border between EU member Ireland and the British province of Northern Ireland, the only land frontier between the EU and the United Kingdom after Brexit. Deal or no deal, the EU believes another delay to Britain's October 31st departure date will be needed, especially if a significant political change took place in Britain. Now, extension options range from as short as an extra month to half a year or longer. The other EU states will need to agree unanimously to grant this.
Well, I'm looking forward to the General Affairs Council this morning, an opportunity to discuss this issues with my EU counterparts. The talks are ongoing. We need to give them space to proceed, but detailed conversations are underway and a deal is still very possible.
It's time to get serious. Europe has so much at stake. So today we are going to get an update on Brexit, and we have to be prepared on all possible scenarios. Hopefully we will have a deal, but we have to also prepare ourselves for a no deal and also have to be ready to consider another extension. So all the options are open, and today we're going to hear the latest news from Michel Barnier.
Meanwhile, London has become the first city to prohibit the global environmental movement Extinction Rebellion from staging protests. The move has been condemned by legal observers and campaigners as a massive overreach, as CGTN's Nawid Jabrakil now tells us.
The plan was to bring this global city to a standstill with protests that caused disruption and raised awareness about climate change. But just over a week after they first started, police here in London have poured cold water on the environmentalists' plans. Late on Monday evening, authorities here issued an order which said anyone protesting with Extinction Rebellion will be arrested. As a result, several hours ago, police moved in here and arrested anyone who was here. People's tents were moved on, and it was a completely different site. That seems to have been cleared up in the past few hours. As you can see, there are still some police around me and plenty of tourists as well, because we're in Trafalgar Square, right in the middle of London, which is a popular tourist destination. Around me, there are a few police vans, and I've been told by a source here that that's just in case any protesters decide to come back. Police say they took these measures because almost 1,500 people have been arrested in the past week since these protests started last Monday. On the other hand, Extinction Rebellion says that their international rebellion will continue. And here in London, there have been a few sporadic protests continuing today, with people gluing themselves to certain government buildings in Westminster. But the message from police here in London is anyone linked to these protests, they will be arrested, and the protests are now illegal. Nawid Jabrakil, CGTN, London.
Now, with China's campaign to eradicate poverty by 2020, 2019 will be considered the last mile. Now, efforts in Ningxia Hui Autonomous Prefecture in northwest China's Gansu province are reshaping local industries as they lift people out of poverty, while CGTN's San Tianwan looks at how mushrooms have become the new ticket to better livelihoods for some farmers.
Mushroom farming and China's arid and mountainous Great Northwest might not seem a good fit. However, farmers in Dongxiang County have turned the odds in their favor.
It's actually better to grow mushrooms at a higher altitude like here. The vast temperature difference makes it a perfect environment for growing high-quality mushrooms. And we can make off-seasonal sales when there's less competition.
Dongxiang is one of the most impoverished counties in Ningxia, but since the local government entered into a cooperative program with partner city Xiamen in southeastern China, the county has received assistance and local industries have seen tremendous change.
At first, our industries had a rather single structure, but then it changed. Take agriculture, for instance. The standardization and customization in the farming mode have largely improved planting efficiency, and the rise in the crop's added values has also benefited our people through higher incomes.
Each mushroom farmer makes about 4,000 yuan every month, about $600. That's above the poverty line of 3,800 yuan for annual disposable income per capita. The joint program has so far lifted 160 villagers out of poverty. There are now plans to build 600 more mushroom greenhouses across Ningxia next year to help 2,000 more people. And for those looking to aim higher, contractors can earn about 20,000 yuan for each mushroom shed they manage. Besides the thriving fungi industry, there are other major income boosters here too, both traditional and something new for once full-time farmers.
I used to grow crops from sunrise to sunset, but the yields weren't great because of harsh weather conditions. Now I have a stable job and income. I have learned new skills, and I can buy things for my children. So I'm more than happy about life now.
This is one of the 170 poverty alleviation workshops opened by the Ningxia government. Over 9,000 people have benefited from the programs.
Local officials say they're giving one final push on the last mile to ending poverty in the prefecture, and by the end of 2020, all the counties in the prefecture are expected to be lifted out of it with no one left behind. Sun Tianyuan, CGTN, Ningxia, Gansu Province.
Well, on that note, let's take a look at how commodities performed today. Oil prices steady today, and that's after 2 days of losses amid that US-China trade dispute that, of course, has investors on edge. However, OPEC did say it hoped to balance markets beyond 2020 in a sign of possible further supply cuts. Meanwhile, gold prices also holding steady today as optimism surrounding those trade negotiations faded. Investors are now waiting for the outcome of a crucial discussion, of course, that will determine how Britain will depart from the EU. Well, let's head into a quick break, but still to come on the show. Coming up, we'll tell you why snails have become a hot commodity in Egypt.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
Accra is my kind of city. That's because when I'm here, I feel like I'm back home in Lagos or Abidjan, which are two of the major cities I grew up in. Business in Africa is high risk. After about a decade covering business news on the continent, I've learned it's all about the high risk, but also the high returns and the high energy. You simply have to adjust in order to keep pace. When I started out as a journalist, my dream was to open people's minds to the different perspectives. From the CEO in the boardroom to the trader out in the street, we all have different stories. From Accra to Addis Ababa, from Cairo to Cape Town, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Here at CGTN, we realize that Africa is on the move, and it's moving fast, but we're moving right along with it. I'm Uche Okoronkwo, and I'm a business anchor and reporter at CGTN.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Panata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Now, senior officials and experts from across Africa have concluded the square kilometer array with Africa partner countries in Pretoria. Now, the event received updates on the progress made in each partner country, as well as the significant advances in development initiatives. With the details, here's CGTN's Angelo Coppola.
The SKA site has a new addition under construction. It's a dish that was designed in Germany and built in China.
This improvement, for me, is striking because when I compare this with the meerkat, which we are more accustomed to, that one looked a bit more bulkier for me, but this is a bit compact. And I think it provides us an opportunity that should we have one like this, it's something that looks like it's a bit more manageable.
Ghana is moving ahead with its program. It's entered the second phase, the engineering phase, coupled with the science commissioning phase. Visiting the SKA site in the Northern Cape has been a real eye-opener.
It's great to be here. This tells us that there's a lot to do when we go back home. Science is picking up over here, and which is very interesting because there are lots has gone in here. Money has been spent, and I believe they will recoup what they have spent over here.
Kenya is one of the SKA partners that's closely involved in the program. They're looking at an existing dish owned by Telkom Kenya and converting it into a radio telescope.
Our recent assessment and the learnings from the conversion that took place in Ghana has taken us back to rethink of establishing a whole new dish for purposes of this kind of research.
The continental partners involved in the program are excited. It's important for each country for different reasons.
That will put my country, within all these advanced countries, So it would just give some sort of visibility to the country. That's the one thing. Second thing, for the science, science. We believe that if we do not have the proper scientists for the next generation, that will be the end of the day.
Astronomy was on the lower side when you come to Ghana. So after the conversion of the dish and through outreach programs, people have started picking it up, especially where we have the antenna.
While the science is exciting, it's also about the collaboration between other African countries and countries around the world in getting to better understand what's going on in the universe around us and beyond. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in the SKA site in the Northern Cape of South Africa.
Now, snails used to be the bane of Egyptian farmers' livelihoods, but now they are milking them for all they're worth. The anti-aging and moisturizing properties of snail slime, known as mucin, is becoming a hot commodity in the North African economy. Here's CGTN's Adel El Maroui exploring how the golden ticket to agelessness is now spurring a boom in this business.
They are slow and slimy. To some people, they don't look appealing at all. Some countries have even labeled them harmful parasites. Yet snails breeding has been booming in recent years thanks to their slippery secretions known as mucin, which skincare experts say are very beneficial.
When a snail is used directly on skin, it gives us much better and natural results than using collagen products. Its secret is mucin, which sinks right into the pores of the skin. Then contraction made through its movement shuts the pores over the secretion, giving us a remarkable outcome. We use snails on the face and all over the body. It's a great way to decrease wrinkles as well as stretch marks.
Yes, you've heard that right. Beauty centers say these creatures can help you look young again. Their mucin contains glycoproteins, healthy acids, antibiotics, and antioxidants, which together helps in skin regeneration. And because this scene of snails walking on your face might not be appealing to many, some snail farms work to extract that liquid and sell it to cosmetics corporations.
I started with 5 snails. Now I have thousands. Under the right conditions, these snails can reproduce rapidly. I had to study these creatures first, and I had to recreate its natural environment. It's a tropical creature, so I made the floor similar to its natural habitat. First, my clients were amateurs who liked pets. Then I started getting orders from beauty centers who realized the benefits from these creatures. And now I even get huge orders for other breeders who want to start a business.
A snail can lay around 1,200 eggs annually. It feeds on 500 types of fruits and vegetables. All they need is a humid, warm environment, which makes Egypt a perfect place to breed. The business of snails and cosmetics began in the 1980s in Latin America. Today, that business is estimated to be worth more than $310 million globally. Many breeders here, like Karim, are waiting anxiously for the government to lift its exportation ban on these creatures. Once it does, that business is expected to grow even faster. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Well then, before we go, let's take a quick look at how Africa's currencies performed today. Kenya's shilling strengthening against the dollar with inflows from diaspora remittances as well as tightening liquidity on the local money markets, helping to ease that dollar demand from importers. Meanwhile, South Africa's rand was firmer as we saw markets waiting for the next step in that US-China trade war. It, of course, is struggling for momentum as fading optimism over that trade truce weighs on risk appetite. Well, that's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on your screen. You can also follow us on our various digital media platforms. From me, Uche Okoronkwo, and the rest of the team, thanks for watching.